The blueprint is out for what Prime Minister John Key envisages will steer the country into more prosperous times. But there has been mixed reaction as to who is going to benefit. Well, joining me now is financial commentator Hickey from interest.co.nz. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Fair to say that your response is pretty scathing?
Yes, I was underwhelmed by the package that was put out yesterday by John Key. It will not produce the step change that he promoted. And he really oversold it as something that was going to reform our tax system. Instead, he's chosen not to really tax property investors. The changes to depreciation will actually hit commercial property investors more than residential property investors. And the changes he's talking about to income tax, where everyone gets a tax cut, will actually, A, be difficult to fund, and B, not achieve what the tax working group was trying to achieve. It will also mean that the people who will really be penalised here are the young and the poor, the ones who don't have property and who spend most of their money on consumption. Because of the potential increase in GST, they'll miss out, and they won't be any closer to the dream of a family home.
I know you're particularly concerned about young New Zealanders, Generation X and Y. I think in a piece you wrote, you basically told them to pack their bags now. Is it really that dire? I mean, how will it impact directly on them?
John Key should have introduced a land tax, which would have really restructured the economy, given the step change that he talked about. That would have given residential property investors a bit of a shock. It may have reduced house prices a little bit, and that would have given New Zealand, young New Zealand, a chance to think maybe I could own my own home at some stage. It would have also rebalanced the economy and increased our growth rate. That's the key thing. Unless we really increase that growth rate and increase real wages, then young New Zealanders who are graduating at the moment into unemployment, remember youth unemployment close to 20%, are going to say, well, I'm not going to get my own family home, incomes aren't high enough, I may not even have a job, I should really go and get a one-way ticket to Australia.
If you had have picked it, you would have picked that we wouldn't have seen the proposed increases in GST and instead we would have seen the land tax. Yes,
well actually the proposed increase in GST, I'm really surprised that John Key's going ahead with that because it doesn't raise much money. Certainly once you compensate people for the GST, only a couple of $100 million, and it creates a whole lot of new bureaucrats in the IRD and social welfare to compensate people. What's needed is a restructuring of the tax system so that we have more tax on the one sector that isn't taxed, which is property, and less tax on income and corporate tax.
We haven't seen all the detail. I mean, we haven't seen numbers as far as tax cuts are concerned. We don't know exactly what's happening with property. Could it come around? I mean, do you foresee that there's a place in the future when we have the detail that you might go, OK, this will work?
John Key specifically ruled out a land tax, a capital gains tax, an
comprehensive capital gains tax. Can you see some movement there?
He's ruled it out. Given that he isn't willing to take on property investors, and it was clear from what he said yesterday, not also in the speech and also in the comments afterwards, where he said that what he was talking about with property taxes was this depreciation issue, which actually is going to hit commercial property and business harder than residential investors. So he hasn't produced the step change, and he has in effect cemented in this huge generational transfer of wealth from the young and the poor to the old and the rich. They are the ones who are backing him, and he's essentially said yesterday that he won't take them on, that he will reward his backers, not the whole of New Zealand.
We haven't seen the numbers, obviously, for the tax cuts yet. Any thoughts on what we will see that top tax cut rate come down to? I mean, there's speculation 30, 33.
Well, to make it in any way sensible, he has to bring that down to 33, so it matches up with the personal, matches up with the trust rate, and gets somewhere close to the corporate rate. The problem is, in his discussions after the speech, he said everyone would get the tax increase, which means it's going to cost $3 or $4 billion. A lot of that's going to be placed down the bottom end of the scale, which means there isn't much room for a big reduction in that top tax rate. And that was what the tax working group said, to really encourage people to work, to get rid of some of these anomalies we have in the system. You need to reduce that top tax rate by a lot, possibly as far as 30 cents. But instead, he's spreading right across the spectrum.
Just finally, there was something you did like the sounds of from that speech, and that was the talk of mining and conservation land, which a lot of people will feel very awkward with.
Well, we've talked about how we're behind Australia and we need to catch up with Australia. One of the reasons they're so far ahead is that they mine. And if we want to increase our growth rate and keep those generations X and Y in New Zealand, we need to increase incomes. We need to increase economic growth. And mining in some parts of the country, where it's environmentally sound, makes sense. And we shouldn't just say because it's mining and there's the words national park next to it, we shouldn't do it. We should if we're going to increase those incomes. Otherwise, those grandparents who have those rental properties will end up watching their kids grow up on Facebook.